yes, if we keep the books clean and we do those reviews and we put things in place to automate, the tax return should be a breeze as well.
Welcome to the Cloud Accounting Podcast. I'm Blake Oliver.
I'm David Leary.
I'm David DiNardo.
And I'm Valerie Heckman.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much for joining us today.
Valerie and David. So for this interview, I'm going to use Leary, I guess. I will not be David for this interview. Is this correct, Blake?
Yes, Leary.
Okay.
Leary
I'll
it
go
is.
Leary.
And maybe
Okay.
going forward.
And going forward, possibly. Okay. So we are at day 3 of QuickBooks Connect. It's after the big party the night before. We're up bright and early. We ran a contest this week, and we have our guest host. So one guest host was not in a contest, who's Valerie. Valerie, you're with Intuit. Do you want to just give a little quick background on who you are?
Absolutely. I'm with Intuit QuickBooks, and I'm a senior product consultant for QuickBooks Online.
What does that mean?
That means that I help accountants get more comfortable using QuickBooks Online and showing them all the exciting things that it can do as they start their journey to the cloud.
Perfect.
And you're based in Chicago?
I am based in Chicago, yes.
But you go all over the place?
I do.
Lot of travel.
I carry a bag and I'm on the road most of the year.
Awesome.
We have to go fast today because you have a flight to catch, right?
I do, yes.
Got it. And David DiNardo, we ran a contest this week. We wanted to give one of our loyal listeners a chance to be on the podcast and guest host. And you wrote like a big, you were on Twitter. You kind of came in from the side. Twitter, there's a lot of people talking about, I want to host, I want to co-host, I want to co-host. And thank all of you for trying to get on there. David wrote this great post on LinkedIn and Facebook, and his friends and family commented on it. He'd be a great guest host. And what caught my eye is like, you're a young millennial, started a cloud accounting firm,
right,
and you're 35 fully remote employees. And it's one of the fastest growing firms in Canada. What's the firm name?
So I own ENVOLTA Cloud Accounting, located in Ottawa, Canada. And we specialize in really the cloud accounting world. So we started in 2014, and we've grown the business exponentially in the last 5 years to the fastest growing business in Ottawa 2 years in a row.
Like fastest growing business period? Or
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So top 10 in Ottawa for 2 years in a row.
Very impressive.
And Ottawa is the capital of Canada, so there's a lot of major businesses there. And then we won fastest growing business. We came 51st in Canada for a 3-year trend. So we are just, leveraging the technology and growing it.
And what's your head count?
So we're at 35 people. We're hiring 10 more people by January. So we're just landing the contracts and keep on going.
Nice.
And I'm assuming you jumped straight into cloud from day one.
We started on some desktop, but the vision, we started 5 years ago, and the cloud apps weren't there yet. So we definitely adopted to QuickBooks Online first. And now everyone's on QuickBooks Online. We have an app stack, and all of our employees work remotely across Canada.
So I think this is going to be our regular news episode.
Yeah.
Because we've been doing interviews, but there's news. News happened here this week at QuickBooks Connect, and news has happened outside of QuickBooks Connect. Believe it or not, there's a world happening of accounting news that still happens. So
yeah, let's talk about what is new from QuickBooks and from Intuit. And we're lucky to have Valerie Heckman here to help us get the overview. So
So it has been an exciting week at QuickBooks Connect. There have been so many different pieces of news across the board, many things shared on the main stage on Accountant Day with Arij, and I'll go through some of that. And then there was also a lot of news in the booths, right? This year we had a lot of the new innovations being really showcased in the booth so that you can come and see a bit of a presentation around it.
So our friend of the show, Ranika Aerosmith, wrote a great article on Accounting Today kind of summing up 3 of the main key announcements that we heard from Arij on, I think it was day 1, the Accountant Day. And the first one that caught my eye, and I think I saw tons of tweets about this, was the Optimization Center. And we got a peek of that. It will actually score your clients and show you how effectively you've set them up based on, I think it was bank rules, whether you've got those in place.
Yes. So we're actually showing you an objective measure of how efficiently each client is set up, and then also recommendations to improve. So it has to do with how many times a transaction is touched or interacted with in QuickBooks Online, which is super exciting.
David, so you obviously have a firm. How do you know when you have all your clients that you're handling one client super efficiency and all your clients are being handled efficiently? Do you have any way to measure that right now internally, or are you really excited about a tool like this?
A tool would be amazing. We're doing it a lot manually right now, but it's all part of the onboarding process. That's where it defines everything. Setting the tone with the client at the beginning, setting them up properly, and then doing the ongoing work. if you don't have a process, you won't be able to do any of these KPIs or anything in order to measure it, right? And then you become more reactive rather than the proactiveness.
Yeah, I can see how it's great. If they're going to open this up to pro advisors, if you don't have any processes, right, you're going to run this tool and like 3 of your clients are going to be like 90% efficient and your other ones are like 22% efficient. And if you don't have any processes, you'll never know why those 3 are that efficient.
Exactly. So we're saying, how can we help the accounting professionals really get their arms around what that looks like and how they can improve it? One of the things I really thought was cool with that is that you can create those bank rules from there and then copy them to other clients within QuickBooks Online without having to do an export, import to Excel. It's going to be really easy to go through a workflow and standardize across clients if you want to. Are you excited about that?
Yeah, very excited. I think that's great.
And it's sophisticated. It's not just let's copy all the rules from this one client to another. You can pick which rules specifically you want.
Which means you could almost create a fake QuickBooks Online company and almost have like a template of rules that you copy over to every one of your clients, because it's pointless. Right now there's 150,000 QuickBooks Pro advisors and every one of them is individually created a rule to code Starbucks to meals and entertainment.
Sure.
But what's going to be exciting is if you niche your clients out into different industries and you master one of those niches, then you can roll it across all your clients in a very streamlined way.
And I've actually seen that happen with the rules today. So I was working with a firm in Seattle that they have real estate clients and every one of them goes to FedEx and goes to the same gas stations and goes here and there and it has all these very similar expenses, and then even the income coming in from certain places is pretty standard. And so they create a standard set of rules that they upload every time they have a new client, and we're just making that easier to do because you don't have to go into Excel and deal with the import and mapping and all those things.
Yeah, rule standards are the new like chart of account standards.
So that's all about getting the data in efficiently, right? The most effective way to do that as possible. And second on the list of features was what happens after that, right?
Yes.
How do we actually close the books? And that was called bookkeeping review. So as I understand it, it's like a really cool checklist integrated into the product. Like, am I describing it right?
Yeah, so it's a checklist and more. So the idea here is that QuickBooks is going to automatically find errors and surface mistakes for quicker resolution, of course, and then also enable you to say, hey, if this particular client has certain things that we need to look at closely, I can create my own kind of checklist around them and keep an eye on things. So we surface all sorts of things that might need attention, right? So if there's, I don't know, things that don't have vendor names, transactions without pays and things like that, we may give you that bump of, hey, take a look at this more closely. And then what I think is really awesome is we've already started doing this. So there is the bookkeeping overview in QuickBooks Online today, but we've gotten so much feedback from our professionals that we're building out even more kind of smart scanning things that it can surface more items that might need attention.
So I love this, right? We're actually presenting, my Chief Operating Officer, Victoria, is presenting in QBO Connect on quality control. We do year ends every month, okay? So our data, we send out reports by the 15th of the following month. If your books are cleaned, so we have an internal checklist, right? The fact that that's going external to everyone, that's very important. And when we talk about real-time accounting, this is the real-time accounting. Make sure the books are clean before you go to the next month and not carry over any slack from month to month.
And when you say you're doing a year-end close, you mean like a hard close every month, not this soft close of, well, it's reconciled, but is it?
We have that checklist, that quality checklist that we go through, the balance sheet, the whole 9 yards, and we actually lock the books after the month so that the user doesn't go in there and mess things up or anything.
This is what separates the firms that are doing good workflow, right? Like from the ones who aren't, because you're saving yourself so much time and eliminating the possibility of errors later down the road.
And because that's technical debt. It's debt you're carrying forward, and eventually you're going to have to pay that debt, and it might be a lot of time at the end of the year.
Yeah, but the software, that's the software term, right? Technical debt is
sure.
Messy code, right? That you end up paying for later when you have to fix it.
And guess what happens? You do the year end, right? You're fixing all the problems throughout the year. The year end takes no time, and it's clean, and you're just ready to automate the tax now.
Do you guys do tax too?
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so why should we have to file extensions every year for clients? If we keep the books clean and we do those reviews and we put the things in place to automate, the tax return should be a breeze as well.
You could theoretically start on that like the first weekend in January.
Absolutely.
Right?
Once the banks are reconciled the last month, you could do the tax return and start doing tax planning, and now that advisory piece comes in place.
Exactly, because you have the time now.
Yeah, exactly.
You have the time now. And I was talking to somebody at the conference that said it used to take 6 hours or more per client to get things ready for the tax return. And of course, if we have that across all of our clients, we have to file extensions to gain that time. And now they're like, it's like an hour because we've been keeping the books up to speed and we're not looking back at what happened. We're working in as real time as possible.
So the third big feature announcement on the main stage was the business performance overview.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. This is one that I'm actually the most skeptical of personally because I come from the Xero world, right? That's where I started in the cloud. And Xero tried to do a business performance overview tab. I'm not sure if you guys are aware of that, but nobody uses it. At least nobody I know actually uses it. So let's talk about what it is, and then, I don't know, David, you can give us your perspective.
Yeah, so it is a tool that's going to show some key metrics and trends and industry comparisons, right? So we have our ecosystem, data from over 4 million small businesses, and we really want to help accountants have a better understanding of their clients and relationship to each other and help drive an impact with that and give you tools that you can use to, look and see how the business is doing as you prepare for those advisory conversations.
It's funny because, Blake, I remember like 6 months ago, you were like, why doesn't Intuit just do this? Why don't they just have benchmarks built in the product? It's so obvious. They have the data, and now they've done it.
But then
just for you, Blake, they added this feature.
So that's the thing is you get these like charts of KPIs trending over time. That's really cool from the QuickBooks data of your client. And then you also get we're going to get benchmarks. So you'll be able to see, okay, what is an appropriate gross margin for a business with 10 to 50 employees also in the restaurant space? Like that's the idea as I understand it, which I think we've talked about, maybe it was you and I, David, maybe it was with a guest, but like this question in my mind is to like, can I trust that data? Like, how do I know those books are clean, right?
Yeah.
Like if I'm going to use benchmarking data, I want to know where it came from. I don't know. But I think it's really cool. There's a lot of potential, but I think also...
But in theory, if you think about layering this, right, the efficiency of the data entry in, you have the closing the book checklist, right? There's going to be a score where Intuit eventually will be able to, for the benchmarks, the only companies that will be included that are people that are at some X score. Like we have confidence that the data is good because
as long as that is happening, right? As long as there is some sort of like confidence ratio that is being used to rank the data, right?
Yeah, because the other 8 plumber businesses I'm being compared to in my zip code they're only putting invoices in, they don't put any of their expenses in.
And what if they don't have
something?
David DiNardo's firm closing the books every month?
Right.
And I think the main thing is the third-party apps, right? You have the Spotlights, the Fathoms, all the giraffes out there doing this, right? In some context that I would rather, and talk about skeptical, I'd rather leverage an app to be integrated specific for what I'm looking for than that generalized data that I don't know if I can, like what's the data count? What's the metric around it? Like there's all these questions behind it.
This episode of the Cloud Accounting Podcast is sponsored by OnPay. Many times when choosing a payroll service, you have to choose between a new startup with a great app or an established company whose tech may feel a little behind the times. With OnPay, you get the best of both worlds. A great app from an established company that's providing payroll for over 30 years in all 50 states. OnPay is an easy-to-use full-service payroll with simple, straightforward pricing and includes all their features. Employee self-onboarding, HR tools, health insurance, workers' comp tracking, and 401k. And with an accountant's dashboard and partner program combined with best-in-class integrations with Xero and QuickBooks, OnPay is the right fit for all your clients, whether they have just 1 or 500 employees. They also handle all the complicated stuff that other payroll providers don't, like agricultural payrolls, including Form 943, multi-state payrolls, and employees with H-2A visas. I'm really excited to tell you that OnPay is offering an exclusive promo code only for the listeners of the Cloud Accounting Podcast to get 3 free months of OnPay payroll service for any of your clients that you set up by February of 2020. Head over to cloudaccountingpodcast.promo/OnPay. That is cloudaccountingpodcast.promo/ONPAY. And use code CAP3FREE when you sign up your clients. That is CAP, the number 3, FREE. And to be clear, you cannot get this promo anywhere else. It's only available to the listeners of the Cloud Accounting Podcast.
Well, this is, I guess this fits a trend that Leary and I'm going to say Leary so we don't get confused. It's me. Leary and I have talked about, which is, the GL providers, right? The QuickBooks apps of the world are becoming very broad.
Right.
And building, features like that where, as soon as QuickBooks came out with receipt scanning, my question was, what's going to happen to all these OCR apps?
Right.
Sure.
But then there's always a use case where they're not going to cover it, right? Because the receipt scanning will be simple in like a QuickBooks and will fit the needs of those people who don't need a specialized tool. And maybe this will be the same way, right?
And that's exactly, like, it depends on your clients, but I want that content behind it to deliver that advisory services. I don't want to generalize anymore, right? I think when you're starting out, it's great for that business owner. But once you start growing a business and you start wanting to deliver that key advisory stuff, then you need that specific content.
And my hope is that us having it, and this is my opinion, right? My hope is that us having that really gives people a taste of what it could look like to use a tool that's even more powerful that, okay, this is what's included in my QuickBooks Online, but if I look at one of these other apps, it's going to put that on steroids, right? And give me capabilities beyond what's here, but at least what's here will help me get that conversation started.
But could actually grow the market for those kind of apps, right? In that people get a taste of it and then they want more.
Right.
And the bookkeeping review is almost the same way. Like we've got the Jetpack workflows, the Arrow
Carbon,
workflows,
throwing Carbon.
Carbon, yeah, Carbon for sure. And so people will start doing the checklist thing for the first time, and then they'll say, okay, what else do I need maybe when I'm ready to get something more robust?
Well, it's just good enough, right? Like you get like the phone apps on iPhone and Android, right? You could take a photo, but then there's all these other apps that would let you do filters and all these other things. And then eventually they put that stuff on the phone, and then you never knew you needed those things. And now, I can do filters. And then it makes you go seek other apps to do crazier filters and meme creators.
But
I think about the audience,
I think that's a drawback too.
Yeah.
Like if you're starting an accounting firm right now and you walk into all these apps, you are overwhelmed.
That's right. Yeah.
And that's very, I could see a high anxiety around that, just walking in and not knowing the direction. And then on top of it, QuickBooks and Xero, whoever, are building similar apps or similar functions than a HubDoc, right?
Yep.
So clients are actually coming to me and be like, I just seen this upload in receipt for QBO, but you've trained me on HubDoc. What's the difference? So now I'm having those.
It's interesting that clients are noticing this now. It's not just us talking inside baseball here on the podcast. Like clients are noticing, there's an app and there's this other app and they have overlapping functionality and they're questioning their accountants and bookkeepers app.
Right, but the general audience, so the folks that aren't lucky enough to have someone like you, they don't even know that OCR stuff exists, and then they see it and they say, oh, wow, gosh, I wish that this had the ability for me to do this with expense reporting and have my employees use this and have more. And you're like, yeah, that exists too. But it's an additional thing that not everybody needs that capability. So it's like, how do we take the core of accounting and then take the core of the cool automation tools and build that into QuickBooks Online and still leverage the ecosystem for the Cadillac of a version of some of these things?
I love that. Great analogy. So there was other news that happened in the last week or two while we have been in the enclosed world of QuickBooks Connect, which I feel like normally I listen to the news like every day. I watch the news and I have no idea what happened over the last 48 hours. Yeah, like the world could have ended outside of this building and I would not know. So let's see if we can talk about some of the news in the accounting world. David, do you have any stories that are...
I have a story that's tangent to something David said about being overwhelmed, right? And it's an article on Financial Times, and the title of the article is "Lawyers' Next Challenge is Too Much Technology." So it's that there's just too many app choices. How do they know which ones? Because lawyers move slow. And if they're going to build a tech stack and redo their firm, they want to do it for the next 10 years. And there's so many startups. There's so much choice. Like, how do they pick the tech stacks to go forward? And so I thought it was an interesting article because I feel like it's the same pain accountants and bookkeepers have been having. I think we're getting more comfortable with it in our space.
It's not just accountants, right? It's everybody has app overload.
I guess that's true. Yes. Podcasters.
No, I read an article about how a typical business across all of its departments, right? And we're talking like mid-sized, large business, will have 200 or more applications being used for different things. And can you imagine being that like chief technology officer trying to corral all of these apps and maintain data security and all that stuff? It's crazy.
And I think this is a big problem that you can turn into an opportunity, right? If I was giving any advice to a business owner, build that app stack and just stick with it. And start with 1 or 2, right? Don't try to do 4 or 5 at the same time. From a lawyer's perspective, Clio raised $250 million, a couple months ago. And, now when we deal with lawyers, it's, hey, we know Clio. We know it integrates great with QuickBooks Online. If you're not on Clio, we can't take you as a client because we're not trying to learn another app in the
this article.
ecosystem.
So there's 1,250 legal technology companies right now building software apps for lawyers.
Did you say 1,250?
1,250, and that's just that industry. Now you go construction. Now you go like every restaurant industry. It's insane. Like it's really crazy industry to industry.
And then what's interesting too is like what's missing, right? Because I feel like so many of my conversations over the last few days, it's that I've got to find the app for this and who's doing that amazingly perfect. And so it's how do we piece through all of this and figure out a strategy for, and I'm curious to know from you, how do you go about evaluating multiple legal apps and landing on Clio? Like what does your process in your firm look like?
I'll give you a shout out. Go to QBO Connect, right? And then just learn. Before you start implementing anything, do an analysis of 3 or 4 apps. What works well for your company and your clients, right? Get your company trained on it. So we have 5 managers. Anytime I'm doing an app analysis, I'm bringing them involved and I'm doing a demo with them and getting the perspective of every single one of our employees before we make a decision. Because they're going to be using the tool.
You've got to get the stakeholders buy-in or the app's not going to get adopted, right? It'll just be, we've got 1 or 2 clients that are using it, but not at scale.
And another thing we do is every month we do a tech session. So we would either bring in an app partner or we would do a demo of a specific app so that the whole company sees it before we implement it.
That's so great. Awesome. That's awesome. Do you do it like lunch and learn style?
Yes.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So I've got some more app news.
Yeah.
Lease Query, were they here at QuickBooks Connect? I'm not sure. We've talked about Lease Query in the past.
Yes.
They do, they're an app designed basically around an ASC 842 on lease accounting, right? Like this, it's funny now that FASB issues an accounting pronouncement and an app is created, or like a dozen.
Yeah, it doesn't happen.
They're turbocharging the ecosystem. Well, Lease Query announced $40 million in Series A funding, so more money pouring into the niche app space. And it was Goldman Sachs Merchant Banking Division that invested $40 million in them. So congratulations.
So I have a question on this. Like, think about this, like, because we've seen this, right? There's a change in accounting standard, right? And people have to do this, and now an app to solve that problem pops up. What if there's a new political administration and the accounting standards possibly change? I mean, are these apps dead in the water if there's ever a change?
I mean, yeah. If somebody, but here's the thing. Is the SEC, FASB, they don't go backwards on this stuff, right? Generally.
Okay.
It just gets more and more convoluted every year. So, right, I think they're probably okay.
Okay, got it.
Because think about it, it's like a sunk cost fallacy, right? Everybody's invested so much money in adopting the new guidance. If they turned it off, then everybody would be pissed off, right?
So I have an article about Bank FI. So they're a European fintech company, and they really help banks, and they just do modern tech services. So invoicing, payments, nudges. I don't even know what a nudge is. It might be reminders to pay, cash management and accounting to businesses. So they're a software tech play, right? What was interesting in the article, I'm going to scroll down here and read you the quote here. And it's really a stake in the ground, and it's this convergence of, we've talked about this, like tech companies are becoming banks are trying to become accounting software companies, right? So I'll read it carefully here. In a foreseeable future, accounting, banking, cash management, treasury management system, and ERPs all use the same date. I probably should say data, but they type date. And this will over time merge into one banking as a platform service, which I thought was a really interesting quote.
I don't see that ever happening. All of these different apps are going to actually use the same format. That would be like if we all had the same plug for our phone, right? Is that ever going to happen?
No. Can't get the same plug for our phone. That's true. I don't know how this would happen. All right, so you're not buying into this convergence.
Well, I'm just playing devil's advocate.
What's interesting with that is, the complexity of all the different banks and how they all operate so differently, and that makes certain things hard to have happen and to standardize when you're trying to accelerate, right? Because you get slowed down by banking. And I've seen firms, and I had a great conversation this week around, do we tell our clients, hey, not only do you have to use Clio, but you also have to use this bank because we like how they operate and what they do.
I'm going to say the opposite. Canada, we're fortunate. We have five.
You don't have that many banks.
We have 5 major banks, so we're able to be even more progressive because we don't have that.
We have over 16,000 financial institutions in the U.S. connect with QuickBooks Online. And those are the ones that connect. And I have people tell me all the time about how the so-and-so bank doesn't connect. So I'm like, what is the total number? I don't know. But what's interesting to me is that I've had some conversations. We didn't talk about this in our main stage news, but having those statements get fetched in and brought into QuickBooks Online is coming in spring to the U.S. And we're able to roll it out much faster in Canada because there are not as many financial institutions to get those statements from. And so
that'd be the loudest applause just 2 days ago.
It's an exciting thing.
We're not talking about just the bank feed data. We're talking the actual PDF. Is that right?
Yeah, the statement. Yeah. So that's one of the things that Arish talked about.
The clicking that is just saved to go get those.
Well, because if you think about it, if you have 100 clients and you have to download their bank statement every month, which you should be doing if you're doing a hard close and filing that away, that's like a 5 to 10 minute process for every client, assuming that somebody hasn't changed the password and assuming that you even have read-only access.
But the thing is, I think that the moral of this is we're coming into a world where accounts have to be at that problem solver, right? So my solution would be find the CSV and then do an upload, right, to save the time. So we have to look at that automation in different ways to get that file, right? And that's what the role of our profession's becoming.
And then if you think about from this article, it sounds like the banks are realizing that it's costing them customers if they don't have some sort of future plan to align things and build out platforms in ways that help customers navigate that differently than they have consumers, right?
It feels like I heard some comments around QuickBooks Connect yesterday. They're starting to get the vibe that maybe the banks are going to start. You want bank feeds? You got to pay us $15 a month. You want to download statements? Like the banks want to create their own accounting platforms and keep you in house. Because like if you're just downloading that, what's the value of the bank at this point? You don't need them at all.
And that's why I think Chase and Bank of America now use Bill.com as their white labeled business payments platform. And they get you in there, and then they take away the ability to export the data. Right? Because once you set up all your bill pay, you don't want to change banks, right? So I've got a little more app news. This one's not as positive, unfortunately. This is a little bit of a downer. Are you all familiar with Canopy? Yeah, so tax software in the cloud, which is a very welcome development, right? There hasn't been a lot of opportunity in that. Well, they were just growing like crazy, and we've talked about this on the show, Leary, but it seems like they expanded a little too fast. Canopy founder and CEO Kurt Averill stepped down Thursday as the tax software company laid off 73 employees after already laying off 100 employees in March. Chief Revenue Officer Jordan Ray will become the interim CEO. So back in March, 100 employees, that was a third of their whole workforce. So now that's like half of the workforce that's left. And what's crazy about this is that prior to the layoffs, they'd been expanding really rapidly. They were opening this really fancy office in Utah, in Lehigh. And I don't know, it's kind of crazy to think what happened. We obviously don't know, but like you hire 300 people, and then suddenly you have to like lay most of them off. How does this happen?
So because I think before we covered that, it was a surprise because we've seen Canopy, like even though I tend to be on the business side, I'm not in the tax management side, but I've seen them at conferences. You see them growing. I always heard good things about them, and then that one day they let off half their staff.
Yeah.
And then now CEO's been let go.
Yeah.
Right.
So
I don't know.
What else do we got this week?
An update on My Payroll HR.
Ooh.
Well, not so much My Payroll HR, but Cache. So Cache is no longer going to process payroll transactions. So
Wow.
Cache, if people remember My Payroll HR,
Yeah.
Cache was the ACH money movement company.
They were the ones that got caught in this whole scam.
Well,
like
they got caught holding the empty $26 million bag.
Right.
Like they didn't do the scam. They just
Right.
are the ones that have got hammered the most by it.
Right.
And so they're basically not going to do ACH transfers into their company anymore. If you're an employer using one of these payroll services, the payroll service will need to wire transfer that money to Cache.
Which is causing tons of trouble, right? They had a bunch of late payrolls with different other payroll providers that are not My Payroll HR that use Cache suddenly couldn't deliver their payroll on time because they didn't have the means to do these wire transfers.
Yeah, they weren't set up for it. And so again, it feels like with Cache, they've been in reaction mode, right? They reacted when they found out the scam happened, and they that bad ACH file was uploaded that they tried to do, and that caused pain for employers or employees of companies. And now this is causing pain because for whatever reason, they had to make that decision to no longer let people transfer stuff in ACH. So I don't know if they're in trouble, not in trouble, like how that's going to impact them, because that was their business model. They're called Cache as in ACH is in their name.
Well, and I wonder if that's a temporary thing. Do we know? Does it say that's forever?
It
or if
doesn't
they
say.
just decided to stop that until they can get ducks in a row?
So I don't have the story in front of me, but I think it was a problem with their bank. Like, this whole system is so complicated. There's so many layers, right? So you have the payroll service provider, then you have the ACH processor, Cache, then you have the bank that actually makes the ACH transfers, which is, we don't even know what that is. I can't remember the Cache uses. And so if the bank says, oh, we're not going to take the risk anymore, that has this ripple effect. Right. And so a great example is this company called Paydata, which services Vermont clients. So that, my payroll HR affected a lot of New York employers. This Paydata company serves Vermont employers. And so Paydata had to spend $1 million of its own money to cover the paychecks of 1,000 employees because Cache told them that at the last minute they couldn't do ACH anymore.
This is just an unbelievable domino.
Yeah.
Like, it just keeps rippling because of one guy. One guy and his bullshit moves.
But also because he was kiting checks for like a year and a half. And
no, 10 years.
Nobody caught.
For 10 years.
Well, he was doing the fake businesses for like 10 years.
Yeah.
But the kiting of checks, I think, was shorter than that.
Okay.
Yeah. But still, that nobody caught it, that there's not some AI.
Well, right. And so I think that's the lesson that I hope everybody who's been listening to you all cover the story over the last, 2 months now almost, is that we've got it. If we're going to move in the direction that we want to, we have to put pressure on all these other institutions to also, the theme of QuickBooks Connect, own the future, right? Like to get to that point where we don't run into these things, because people will always find the holes in those opportunities. And it's kind of amazing to me that this hadn't happened sooner in a big way.
Well, and as a business owner, how do we know apps out there that are not doing the same thing, or like what's the regulation around it, right? So we're advising our clients to use X app, but we don't know what's going on in the background and with the security around it and then it's on us. It's on somehow the businesses and the advisors, because we're giving that advice.
Yeah, because every app that's here has all these dependencies. Everybody's using these microservice architectures. That app's built on Amazon. Well, that just been since Amazon, but then maybe they're using some credit card purchasing from Stripe. So now they have that dependency in their app, and it trickles down. Oh, they're using some piece of code from some other company. Oh, and they're using a bank transfer service, and they partner with this other regional bank. And those are all dominoes. And once one falls, like, that app all of a sudden is useless for all your clients, and you're the one who feels the effect of that.
And this might be a dumb question, but is there insurance around that, right? Or what would an insurance plan for a business or an accounting firm look like when it comes to those things? I don't personally know. But
so after this story, I contacted my insurance and got data breach insurance.
There you go.
To protect my company, because that could happen, right?
It's the world we live in, right?
Every accounting, bookkeeping firm should be looking into that as an option, right? Because we're relying on this world of cloud apps, and there's a lot of them, and hundreds of them that we might be using, and we need to protect ourselves. So I think that's a wrap. I know, Valerie, you've got to get on a plane back to Chicagoland.
Yeah.
And David DiNardo, it was so great having you on the show.
The one other thing, I just want to give a shout out to my marketing team. I wouldn't be on here if we didn't do the social media gig. I recommend all marketing accounting companies to do social media and get out there and really look at the marketing around it as well.
Yeah. Twitter it up. LinkedIn, Facebook, all of it.
Well, so speaking of those, how would they contact you, David, if they want to?
So you can go on my website at www.envolta.ca or on LinkedIn, David DiNardo.
David, you need to get on Twitter as well, because we did not find you on Twitter.
You always said pick one social media and do it.
Fair enough. Well, if you want to get in contact with me, probably Twitter's the best way to do it. I'm at V Heckman.
As always, I am at Blake T. Oliver. And how about you, Mr. Leary?
I'm David Leary on Twitter.
Thank you both.
Thanks.
Thank you for having me. Bye-bye.